Roth conversions can potentially be one of the most powerful tax strategies either before retirement or even in the early years of retirement, but they can also backfire if you do them incorrectly. I've seen people pay way more in taxes than they otherwise would have if they never even went forward with a Roth conversion strategy in the first place. And I've also seen people pay much more in their Medicare premiums and have much more of their Social Security taxed because of the improper way of going about these Roth conversions. So today I'm quickly going to share 10 of the most common and the most costly mistakes that I've seen people make. I'll also be sharing, of course, when is the right time to consider doing a Roth conversion. And finally, I'll include some strategies if you are someone that this fits. And the key word there is if, because a Roth conversion is certainly not for everyone. It's definitely going to include a conversation with your tax professional and your financial advisor, right? But these are important things to consider. So because there's 10, I'm going to try to get through these without boring you to death. But I want to make sure that we understand some of the issues at hand here. So let's start with number one, and that is converting everything at one time. Now, this isn't going to be probably a common occurrence simply because if you have any financial advisor, if you have anyone that you speak to, I would hope that they would stop you from doing this. The obvious issue, of course, is that you're probably going to jump multiple tax brackets by doing this. A Roth conversion is as simple as taking a pre-tax asset and moving it over to your post-tax asset. Now, what you've done is you've added that amount to your income for the year. So if you have a traditional IRA, any dollars that you take in that traditional IRA and move over to your Roth IRA are going to be added to your taxable income for the year. So let's say that you have $500,000 in a traditional IRA. You move that entire $500,000 over to your Roth IRA. That means that $500,000 is now included in your yearly income on top of what you've already made this year. So you can see how that would be quite a significant issue if you converted everything at once. That leads me into my second mistake here, and that's pushing yourself into a higher tax bracket by doing a Roth conversion. Because remember, if the conversion amount counts as income, this does have the capability to push us up into a higher tax bracket. I'll get to a few of the reasons why that's a big deal here in a moment, but know that it doesn't actually take converting the whole amount of your pre-tax asset over to your post-tax asset to do this, right? This is just simply a matter of how you make income and where you currently fall in your tax brackets. A Roth conversion of even $5,000 or less could push you over into a tax bracket that you weren't aware of without having knowledge of your income for the year. Third mistake here is simply going to be a result of those first two, right? And that is triggering IRMAA surcharges. So this is a fancy word for saying you have to pay more for your Medicare premiums if you are above a certain threshold. So here's what it currently is in 2025. And the important thing that I really want to point out here is even $1 over the threshold could mean higher Part B and D premiums for you. Remember that normally Medicare Part A, yes, is free, but Parts B and D are going to be based off of your income, and the government is going to look at 2 years ago, right? I don't know why they look at 2 years ago, but they have a 2-year look back period at what they're looking at your income to decide on how much you have to pay. So yes, people absolutely hate this one, right? You go $10 over the threshold there and you end up paying $1,000, $2,000 extra dollars per year in Medicare charges. 4 is going to be similar here, and that is making your Social Security more taxable, right? I say more taxable because your Social Security, again, is taxed based off of your income. So if you think of a Roth conversion, it's going to increase your income. Therefore, you might have a chance at increasing how much of your Social Security is taxable. Remember, only up to 85% of your Social Security is taxable, and it's based off of these numbers here. Again, this is 2025, and this could be subject to change, but it is important to know. But this could really be a silent killer of tax savings in retirement. A lot of folks are currently waiting for President Donald Trump to remove all taxes from Social Security. I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't think it really has a shot even from the start, but know that Social Security taxation is another important piece to be considering when you're doing a Roth conversion. Now let me kind of step out of this continual income tax piece that I am talking about here, and let me go to mistake number 5, which is starting your 5-year clock too late. So this is something that not a lot of people understand about a Roth IRA, is that you have to have it open for 5 years before the earnings portion of your Roth IRA is going to be tax-free. Now let me kind of rewind there a bit. If you don't have a Roth IRA that has been open for 5 years, you are not able to have the full benefit of having a qualified distribution from that Roth IRA. And that means that you're going to have to end up paying taxes on the earnings if you withdraw money prior to then. This even means if you are over 59 and a half years old, which is normally the qualified age, of course, to take a retirement distribution, yes, this still means you have to have it open for 5 years. There's a special caveat here that's actually quite interesting, that if you open a Roth IRA prior to the tax day, so around April 15th, of course, if you open a Roth IRA prior to that day, you get a whole year and those few months leading up to that day's tax year added to your 5-year clock. So let me give an example for a lot of folks we worked with in 2025. Around April 1st, we reached out to a lot of people and said, hey, if you want to open a Roth IRA to start your 5-year clock, now might be a good time to do so, because in the government's eyes, it would mean that you opened this Roth IRA on January 1st of 2024. So you can be that head start in your Roth IRA. Speaking of waiting too long or waiting too late to open a Roth IRA, my next mistake is waiting too long to do a Roth conversion, because like I said at the start of this video, this does not make sense for everyone. So based off of your age, based off of if you're retired, based off of your income, this is really going to impact things here. A lot of people get into retirement and they start watching YouTube, or they start reading articles and they learn about a Roth conversion, but don't necessarily consider it just because it sounds a lot more complex than it really is. And then of course, years go by, they start paying a lot more taxes, and they look at RMDs coming around the corner and they think, man, I've got to do something about this. And then Roth conversions are done. But unfortunately, it's too late to make sense from a tax standpoint. So I'll get to that a little bit later with more detail, but waiting too long can be an issue with a Roth conversion. And speaking of RMDs, once you hit RMD age, right? So depending on your age, 73, or if you are starting taking RMDs after 2033, it's going to be age 75. You can't start doing, or you can't be doing Roth conversions once you start your RMDs. The next mistake is simply paying the taxes due from doing this Roth conversion from the funds of from the traditional IRA or from the conversion itself. Ideally, in the best case scenario, you would pay this with cash, of course, because you're allowed. This would allow you to move the full amount from your traditional IRA or your pre-tax account over to your Roth IRA, and it would continue to compound at that same level. So of course, earlier in my $500,000 traditional IRA example, let's say that you converted $50,000 in a year. Ideally, you would move $50,000 over to your Roth IRA, which would mean paying the taxes from cash or from savings and not using a portion of that $50,000 to pay for taxes in that year. So it's important to plan for how you're going to pay for taxes. Like I said, this is going to be based off of your income. So depending on where that's at, that's going to decide how much you owe in taxes. Next mistake is a very important one. It may not pertain to all of you, even if you are doing a Roth conversion, and that's the pro rata rule, or maybe it also might be called the IRA aggregation rule. And this is just a fancy word for saying how much of my current pre-tax account is post-tax. That's a little confusing, so I'll actually give you an example here. Let's say that you're someone that likes to drink coffee, right? And there's two coffee drinkers in the world, right? There's those who use cream or milk or sugar or whatever, and those who do not. In the case of your regular pre-tax IRA or your 401k, you can think of all of those assets in that account as regular black coffee, right? But if you were someone who started making after-tax contributions, like a lot of you are going to have to start doing with your catch-up contributions if you're over 50 years old, which I actually mentioned that in another video, you know that you have now introduced a new type of tax asset into the account, right? So it's now mixed. You have introduced cream into your coffee. And in this case, yes, the black coffee is your pre-tax assets, and the cream is going to be your after-tax assets. And the IRS does not like when you blend those two together. And because of that, if you do a Roth conversion from an account with both coffee and cream in it, it's going to say, the IRS is going to say, well, we see that a portion of this is pre-tax and we see that a portion of this is after-tax. So you go ahead and use the ratio that you currently have, and that is the amount that you owe us on taxes. But it's very important to know you can't just convert pre-tax dollars in isolation if you have other traditional IRAs, right? So it doesn't matter if you open 10 different traditional IRAs, the IRS is really just going to view this as one large bucket. So you really need to consider all of your pre-tax assets in aggregation with one another before you ever consider doing a conversion. Roth conversions are final, right? After 2018, they made recharacterization is a fancy word for it. They made that where you could basically redo or undo a Roth conversion no longer available, right? So if you do a Roth conversion, know that it's final. Now the final one here is just assuming that you're going to have very high rates of return after doing a Roth conversion, because this really is one of the most important pieces to a Roth conversion being worth it, being effective, and being successful, is that the returns afterwards are quality, right? At least decent, because that's how we're going to make up for paying those taxes present day, is that we're going to outgrow over time, and then when we withdraw, it's going to be tax-free. So I know you might be a great stock picker, you might be someone that is fantastic in your investment strategy, but being overly confident in your returns of the future might do you some harm here. If you are still here, before we wrap up, I'm going to go ahead and share some of the times that I mentioned earlier that it might be interesting to look into a Roth conversion. Again, this is all going to be based off of your time period of retirement, what age you are, things of that nature. One of the most common that you're going to hear is, yes, low income years. This is going to be the right time, or could be the right time, to fill up lower tax brackets and pay less on that conversion. Early retirement windows, as I wanted to mention earlier, after you stop working but before Social Security and RMD start, could be an ideal time to do so. This is, generally speaking, one of your lower tax brackets that you're going to be in for a long time, or since you've been in quite a while. So it could be a good time to, again, fill those lower tax brackets. Market downturns, yes, these can make sense, or at this time can make sense, simply because converting while account values are low allows you to pay tax essentially on a discount. And then, of course, we're hoping that the market turns around and all of those earnings are going to be tax-free in the future. If you're someone expecting higher future brackets, of course, this is just due to your own beliefs. If you are expecting to have higher future tax brackets, of course, it makes sense to do a conversion at a lower tax bracket. The last two are a little unique here. So heirs in higher brackets. If you have children that are making more money, and you know that whenever you pass on a pre-tax asset like a 401k or like an IRA to them, that it's going to be really expensive for them to withdraw over that 10-year time window they're going to have, this might be something that you want to consider paying the tax on now so they don't have to do later. This is really going to be for their benefit more than yours, but some parents that we work with, this is something they consider. The last one here is a spousal illness. Okay, so if you are familiar with the widow's penalty, it simply just means having a higher tax rate because you're now filing single, right? You don't have the deductions to take as a married couple. You don't have all those benefits that you did then. So essentially, really all we're talking about here is just knowing what's coming in the future with your tax rate and trying to get ahead of that today by paying at the lower tax rate. So you really notice that pattern here with just about everything I just mentioned, and that is being able to take advantage of a lower tax bracket, or of course in the portfolio example, a lower account value in order to pay less taxes and then have future long-term growth. But again, I want to go back to the importance of realizing your timeline, right? So if you have a long-term timeline, of course, to allow your investments in your Roth IRA to compound, that account value hopefully is going to grow larger, and just simply comparing that on a I have to pay taxes on it and I don't have to pay taxes on it, right? That's going to be a big difference. Last thing I'll mention here are some strategies to consider, just kind of wrapping everything up that I've talked about today. The first one is simply just going to be doing partial conversions over time rather than doing that mass movement of money that I mentioned at the start, right? Spreading that tax hit out and staying in a lower tax bracket to the best of your ability. Weighing your taxes saved versus IRMA and Social Security impact, right? You don't want to save $1 in taxes only to have to spend more than that in Medicare. You don't want to have to pay more in Social Security because you save taxes. So if you work with a financial advisor, you know that they're going to be able to tell you what you might be able to save based off of some assumptions by doing a Roth conversion. So doing a comparison of those two might be helpful. The third strategy here is just, yes, being proactive during down years, right? So we recently saw this year that President Trump came out and he included all these tariffs in his new plan, and the market did very poorly for about 2 months. That time represented an ideal time for some to look at doing a Roth conversion due to some of the principles I mentioned earlier. Always have a conversation, probably with your tax professional if you have one of those, and with your financial advisor if you have one of those about doing a Roth conversion, right? You don't want to unintentionally trip a tax wire that you weren't expecting to and owe the IRS a large tax bill. Because like I said at the start of this video, the Roth conversion can potentially be one of the most powerful tax strategies in retirement, but it might be a terrible strategy if done the wrong way. So always consider this with your financial plan. I'd be more than happy to help you out or even share a projection with you based off of your income, based off of your timeline, based off of how much you have in pre-tax versus post-tax, like a Roth IRA, if you are interested in that. But thank you so much for your viewership today. I know this was a longer video than normal, so if you made it all the way through, you are a real trooper, and I appreciate you. Have a good day.